This happened about a year ago, and it still shocks me to this day. I joined the soccer team in high school and met this amazing person. We were friends instantly. He was 1 year older than me, but the age difference never bothered either of us. We would always hang out during lunch, and day by day we got closer and closer. He became my best friend in half a year, or one semester. Most of the time while spending lunch together, he would borrow my money and I would always treat him. I had a job and he didn't. Even with the money he had, he would spend it rigorously on sport equipment and video games. But mainly he was a sports addict. He joined the soccer team, football team, lacrosse team, volleyball team, and dodgeball team just during the years he was in high school. The first time I went over to his place, I was greeted by a giant friendly pit bull. He always told me that his favorite dog was a pit bull, but never told me he owned one. He gave me a tour of the house, and soon after, he went out in his backyard to play some basketball. Sadly, he passed away. Apparently one day he was running late for class, and suddenly struck by a car. When I heard the news, I couldn't eat for months, and lost over 30 pounds. I isolated myself from others, and had no communication or contact from other people or classmates. I was completely depressed. This one Friday evening after heading home from class, I decided to hang out by myself on the benches outside our school. We would usually do that after a long day, and almost every Friday. I sat and stared out to the field for hours, and when the sun started to set, I walked home. I took a shortcut through an alleyway because it was getting dark fast, and it was awfully quiet. Snap. A stick broke from behind me. I looked back to see a giant figure towering over me. I was 5'5", and this guy was at least 6'1", with his hood over his head. Since I was halfway through the alleyway, the only way I could go was straight ahead until I could reach my street, and so I started speed walking faster, thinking maybe it's just someone passing by. Yet every time I looked back, he was gaining on me, coming closer and closer. Right as I was about to reach the end of the alleyway, he pulled me back. I tried to break free, but his grip was overwhelmingly strong. He looked at me and smiled. His teeth were rotten, and his breath smelled like alcohol. He told me to empty out my pockets and give him all my money. I was scared for my life and started shaking terribly. When I reached for my wallet, he shook me because my hands were trembling really bad. He thought I was going to piss my pants. I was sweating uncontrollably. He grabbed my wallet with his other hand and told me to take off my watch. I tried to tell him that I couldn't because it was my dad's watch, but all that came out was a mumble and a squeak. Some kind of metal or steel hit the ground hard and scared the shit out of both of us. We both looked down the other end of the alleyway to see a pit bull. This one was huge, as if it was on steroids. It growled and stared directly at the thief. Then it started running with its mouth wide open, ready to attack. The guy dropped my wallet and started running away as fast as he could. Still shaken, I stood there, motionless. Surprisingly, the dog stopped near me and looked at me and smiled. At that instant, I remembered my best friend's smile. It was almost identical. The way it grinned and the way its nose and mouth formed reminded me of my best friend. I almost broke down then and there, but I let out a smile. Just as I did, it ran the direction where the robber went, and I chased after it. Because the dog was so much faster than me, it disappeared into the night and never saw it since. To this day, I still believe it was him, my guardian angel and my best friend who chased away the thief. Maybe it was a sign of him repaying all of his debt to me. The countless burgers and fries I bought for him during lunch. But ever since that incident, I have lived my life remembering and thanking my great friend. I would help his parents buy groceries, go over and visit them, and hang out with them. Say what you want about that, but I owe him my life. When I had just graduated from university, I did some traveling and came back home to the UK some months later. With great memories, but completely broken. I took whatever job I could get my hands on. I didn't care what it was, as long as I got paid. I could always look for a better job later. So within a couple of weeks, I landed myself a basic admin job in a small lawyer's office. I had to answer phones, do billing and paperwork in the back office, and whenever the bell on the front door went to let me know a member of the public had walked in, I would leave the back office and go to the small reception to help. That was pretty much it. Only about 8 people worked there and it was nice and easy. I had worked at this place for around 6 months, and the building it was in was a big old Victorian house, but each room was converted into an office or a meeting room of some sort. Having been there a little while and living less than a mile away, I was asked to start opening up in the mornings, which I was fine with. Just to let you know a bit more about the layout of this place. You walk in through the front door just like any normal house, but you were then faced with 2 doors. One directly in front of you, which was for staff and locked to the public, and one to the left, which was for customers and went into reception. I would open up the front door, go through the staff door each morning, and have to walk around the office to unlock the door for customers from the inside. Hopefully this makes sense. One morning, I opened up the front door and the staff door as normal, locking it behind me, and walked through the office towards reception to open up the door for customers. The mail had been delivered early that day, so I was just looking through that, and hadn't unlocked the door for customers yet, as it was a bit early. All of a sudden, I heard the bell on the door for customers. I knew I hadn't unlocked it yet, and no one was in, and I had definitely locked the staff door behind me. I hastily went out to the reception and saw a short, older man dressed in a brown suit and wearing a Tribly hat. He was carrying what looked like an old-fashioned doctor's case. He had his hat pulled down low, but I could see he was a man in his 70s, and he was just standing there in the reception looking around. I thought maybe one of the lawyers had come in early for an appointment or something, so I asked the man if I could help him. He completely ignored me and started walking towards the customer exit and entrance. I asked a couple times, "Excuse me, sir, can I help you?" Still, no response. Just a slow walk to the door. Then the door swung open without him even touching it, causing the bell on it to do its usual loud ding, just in time for him to walk through it. I just stood, unable to move, as he walked through it, and slammed shut behind him. I immediately went to open the door to follow him, but it was locked. I had my keys in my hand, so I quickly unlocked the door and went out in the street, but there was no sign of anyone. I went through the house and I was completely alone. I had no idea who the man was, how the door opened for him and shut itself behind him. How did it lock and unlock like that? This guy was walking at a snail's pace and was pretty old. He couldn't have disappeared like that. I sat in reception trying to work out what had happened, and soon enough the rest of the staff started filtering in. One of them, who had been there a number of years, asked me if everything was okay, and I blurted out what had happened. She just looked at me and smiled and said,
"We wondered how long it would take you to see him."
She went on to explain to me that the house had been a doctor's practice more than 60 years ago. The doctor and his wife lived upstairs and used the downstairs as his practice. There have been numerous sightings of the doctor around the house and of his wife. My colleague took me up to the attic where we kept all of our company files. There she showed me old photos of the building back then, which the lawyers had kept to show how they had refurbished the place. Having had a look through, I came across a photo of the man I had just seen downstairs smiling back at me, the good doctor and his wife. Thankfully, I only had around 2 weeks left of working there before heading back to university, but never again did I so much as stay in a room by myself in that house. My experience opened the floodgates for the other staff to tell me their stories, and it looked like I got off lightly. I have lived in my house for a few years now, alone. I don't own any pets or have any roommates. It's a nice sturdy house. Like all homeowners, I've took my time to learn this ins and out of the house, including every house sound there is. I could tell you exactly which bump in the night is which and where the sound is coming from. As for me, I'm your standard guy. I live in a small town, but I work about a half hour down the highway in the city. I have friends and coworkers. Occasionally, I'll do something with them on the weekends, but mostly I keep to myself. There's really nothing unusual about my life until recently. I don't know how far this goes back. As long as I've only really noticed it the past few months. And it's never really been an issue either. Of course, until the other night. When I go to sleep at night, I hear a ball rolling around on my floor. Now, let me be clear. It's very subtle, and I've never found the source. I don't know how long it's been going on because it only happens I'm finally falling asleep. You see, my routine is pretty simple. I get home from work usually around 4. I undress and get into something a bit more casual, and I either watch TV or play video games most of my time, if I don't go out. I always turn in for bed between 10 and 11 at night. I've always done this routine fairly regularly for the past God knows how long. I'm happy with it. But one night, I noticed the sound of a ball rolling across the floor. Now I sleep in the total silence, no fan, no TV. In fact, during the summer, the quiet hum of the central air is the most I'll deal with. So, for whatever reason, one night, just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the whirring of this ball rolling across my bedroom floor. It sounds just like a marble. So I got out of my bed to see what it was, but the sound was gone. I assumed it had found its destination, but I searched around a bit anyway, but couldn't find it. After returning to bed and drifting slowly back to sleep, I heard it again. I repeat my expedition one more time before tossing in the towel and just going to sleep. Again, right before I'm actually asleep, I heard it, rolling across the floor. This went on for weeks. It was bothersome the nights I would notice it, but I would eventually let it go. My best guess at the time was a small critter moving something around, and my waking would spook it. It wasn't until I brought it up to some coworkers the other day, where people started suggesting something otherworldly. We laughed it off, but they finally got me to promise I would try and catch it on audio. Last night, I dug out my old audio recorder. This thing was several years old and had pretty limited storage, but it should do. I laid it down next to my nightstand and decided I would also stay up too. I figured it's possible it was all in my head and maybe there was never a sound. So I sat in my bed for a few hours longer than usual, playing on my phone, waiting for the marble to come rolling by, but it never did. It was getting late and I decided to turn it on. I figured I may as well leave the recorder on, in case it happens while I sleep. Just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear it. The quiet whirring of marble on hardwood rolling across the floor. Instead of climbing out of bed, I listened this time. It stopped. I grew more convinced that it was all in my head. It seems that when I'm awake, even if I'm not moving, the sound stops. I use this as an excuse to go to sleep. The marble softly sang me to sleep. This morning I almost forgot about the tape. I grabbed it on my way to work. It took a while to finally get a chance to review my findings. I spent the first half of my lunch break fast forwarding and stopping, trying to find when I heard it. At last, I find bedtime. I hear myself climbing under the covers and getting comfortable. Every move I make sounds amplified under the cracking of the low quality tape. I sigh a few times and shift around before resting. Silence. Now I'm frozen, listening to the silence behind the crackles of tape. It's almost becoming eerie listening to myself try to sleep. And then, the clock of a marble landing on the floor, as if someone dropped it. The marble starts rolling. It's hard to make out, but it's there. I only heard it a few seconds before it stops. Confused, I check to see how long the tape is. The recorder still shows a few hours. I realize this is probably the moment I had noticed it last night and stopped. Then the rolling resumes. For several moments I listen to it roll one way, stop, then roll the other way, and repeat. I'm mapping out my bedroom in my head to see where it might be relative to the recorder. It sounds like it's rolling out of my closet down towards my bed before it stops, then it rolls back. A chill shivers down my spine as I listen. It seems clearer than ever. Back and forth, back and forth. The silence is broken by some breathing. The breath panics more and more rapidly. Within moments, it sounds like an Olympic runner is dangerously out of breath right next to my recorder. Panting and panting, heavier and heavier. I immediately felt sick to my stomach. Suddenly, there's a blood-curdling scream. It sounds like someone being stabbed over and over. The scream only pauses to moan before becoming sharper than ever. The scream persists for what feels like minutes, and then silence. The crackling on the tape continues. I'm frozen solid. At this point, I was sitting in the break room alone. I checked the recorder. It has an hour remaining, but the rest was silence. Occasionally, I would hear myself shift or sigh in my sleep, but nothing else. I had no clue what it was, and I avoid talking about this to anyone. But I came here because I had to tell someone. Because I couldn't sleep tonight. When I tried, I heard a marble rolling across my floor, and I lurched awake. I haven't slept all night because I don't know what is in there. My grandpa was a great hero, so they say. My family, especially my grandma, always spoke about him and his good deeds during the Viet War. It's too bad I didn't know him because he died shortly after my birth. My parents said that he only got to hold me in his arms once before passing away from cancer. I guess it's important to note that I'm a minority in my community. This meant that many people would bully me. I live in America, and since the election, racism has been a much more harmful act than just bullying. Just a day after the election, I was followed and attacked by one of our neighborhood racists. I would regularly pass his house, and he would always give me this look of hatred. If he was outside while I was walking, he would call me names and swear at me. Like I said, I was followed and attacked. I'm a senior in high school, but because of my physical build and small size, I would look a lot younger and would be prone to bullying. I lived no more than 10 blocks away from school, and so I ended up walking home every evening. In the mornings, I would get dropped off by one of my parents. So after a full day of school, I start packing up and going home. I absolutely hated walking home because it would mean I would have to walk by that crazy racist guy in my neighborhood. I could always take an alternative route, but it meant I would have to waste another 10 minutes just walking around. Anyways, I ended up walking his route, and strangely I didn't see him outside. It was a nice day and the sun was shining, so he would usually be sitting outside in his lawn chair, but I didn't see him that day. As I was about to turn the corner on my street, I hear a loud bang, and I look back only to see him swinging his door wide open, holding alcohol in one hand and a knife in his other. Our eyes locked, and he, as usual, started calling me names and swearing at me. I looked at him in disgust only to see his face turn as red as lava. He pointed his knife at me and asks, "What the fuck are you looking at?" I knew he was drunk, and so I just mouthed the words, "Fuck off." I assume he saw that because he became enraged and started chasing after me with that damn knife in his hand. He threw his beverage at me and I started running. I was so close to home I could almost taste it. I sprinted as fast as I could, only to feel a cut across my back. Luckily, it was sharp, and I was in my fight or flight response with adrenaline fueling my body, so it didn't sting at the time. When I looked behind me, he was right on my ass, no more than 2 feet away. When I turned back around to face the front, I see this man about 30 years old in an old military outfit running towards me. I scream out "help!" and he stops and stands there. He reaches and takes out a pistol from his side and calls out, "Hey you cocksucker, pick someone your own size. Don't be such a wimp." I instantly stopped in my tracks and looked back only to see that bastard run away. It was only a couple weeks after that my grandma suddenly took out a picture of my grandpa while he was serving in the army. I felt I recognized him, and that's when it hit me. The person who saved me from that maniac was my grandpa. Needless to say, that man who chased after me is probably in jail by now.